All right, to start this last video off and finish our toolbox, we're going to start by welding the hinge in, and we're going to weld it to the bottom part of the box first. The barrel section, or the round part of the hinge, we want to set flush on the back of the box with the leaf on the inside. And then we're going to do a series of spot welds down the back of the box to hold it in place. It doesn't take a bunch, just about 5 of them there will work just fine. So we want to make sure that we get the barrel set flush on the back of the box, and then we want to check the edges because the hinge is a little shorter than our box. So we want to make sure that our hinge is centered in the box as best we can. And then we're going to space our spot welds out about 2 inches or so. And that should give us about 5 spot welds total. It should be plenty to hold this box together. So if you'll notice, the edge of the hinge is a little bit narrower than the end of the box. And if you don't get that centered in there, on the bottom, it may not make too much of a difference, but on the top, your lid is not going to sit properly when it's closed. All right, so we're back at the spot welder. First thing we want to do is try to make sure our hinge sits in there nice and flat. We want that barrel to sit pretty evenly, and we want to try to make sure our hinge is centered in the back of the box. Just try to split the difference on each end. The hinge is a little narrower than the back of the box, or the box itself. So we'll start with doing one spot weld on one end. And again, make sure you put all your pressure down. Make sure you hold this switch until the machine shuts off on its own, so it has plenty of time to make its spot weld. Once we've got that one done, I find it's better to go to the other end and do the next spot weld down here. And this helps to keep your hinge from being crooked in the bottom of the box. If you just work your way down, your hinge may end up a little crooked. So after we've got those 2 on the ends done, we'll double check, make sure our hinge is not crooked in there in any way. And then we're going to go ahead and do a one right in the center. And then we kind of work our way down, just kind of splitting the difference. I think we end up with about 7 spot welds by the time we're done. Buzz. Click. Buzz. Click. Click. Buzz. Click. Click. Buzz. Click. All right. There's my sound effects for the spot welder. We have our hinge spot welded on nicely. Now it's time to move on and spot weld the top piece on. All right, so we're ready to spot weld the top onto the bottom half of the box. And this one's a little tricky, and this is where you might need a friend to come help you, because it's kind of hard to hold both pieces of the box and the lid and trigger the spot welder all at the same time. So, one thing, again, we want to make sure our lid is centered on the hinge, because the flaps on your lid are meant to go on the outside of the bottom of the box so that they fit properly. So once you got a kind of idea of where you want to put it, you're going to do like you did on the bottom, and you're going to start with one spot weld on one end. You get it down there nice and tight. And then again, this is one where you got to try to make sure you don't let any other parts of the box touch the other parts of the spot welder, because you will get a slight electric arc between those pieces, and it'll end up like burning the edge of your box. So once we get it positioned here properly, we'll go ahead and fire our spot welder. And again, you want to make sure you hold that trigger down until the machine shuts off on its own. And take your time setting this up as I'm doing. I want to make sure it's right. Like I said, this is a place where you might want to get a friend to hold this. I'm kind of using my hip and my leg and kind of everything I can to do this by myself. And it can be done. It's just a little tricky. So here we've got it held in position. We're going to go fire the spot welder. Buzz. And we've done our spot welding. So now we want to go ahead and do the other end and make sure it fits up nice and tight, and make sure it's nice and centered for us before we go ahead and do our spot weld. This one should be a little easier because the other spot weld on the other end should hold things in place a little bit better for us. So go ahead and click, buzz. There's our spot weld. And then we'll just do like we did on the bottom, and we'll space our spot welds out pretty evenly. And you can kind of use the spaced spot welds on the bottom as a guide, and then these should go fairly simply. Click, buzz. Click, buzz, click, buzz, click, buzz, click, buzz. All right, there we go. We got the top of our box and the bottom of our box are now married into one piece, and we got our hinge. It's a little tough to work, but it'll loosen up over time. All right, so our lid and our bottom are all spot welded together. They fit pretty well, and we want to make sure everything lines up. Looks pretty good. Um, both ends, the end closes over the way it's supposed to. And now we got to go work on spot welding the last little bits on here. Not spot welding, riveting. We're going to use a new tool called a rivet and a rivet gun to set these in. And this is a rivet here. And the way these work is there's a little shank on there and a ball that we pull up inside of that sleeve, and it spreads it out so it fills up the space in the hole and pulls things nice and tight. So we got our rivet gun or rivet setter, and you got to squeeze these, and they do take a little bit of hand strength. So you want to take the what we call the shank and slide it down in there. Make sure it fits all the way down in there against the head of the rivet. And then as I squeeze this, you'll see the ball get pulled inside of that shaft or the tube there, and it spreads it out and actually pulls it nice and tight. And that's kind of the benefit of these rivets. And if you give it a few more squeezes, and it's really hard to do with it not squeezing metal together, it actually will snap off the shank for you nice and clean. So we're going to go ahead and rivet the first part of our handle holder in here. And it's a good idea to make sure you put rivets in both holes to make sure they line up. Otherwise, if it moves while you're riveting, you may not be able to get it to line back up. And so I squeeze it once, and I'll squeeze it again, and yep, there it popped, and the rivet snapped off. It broke the end off nice and clean for us, so we don't have anything sticking up above the top. So we'll go ahead and do the other side real quick. Give it one squeeze, and if you need help with this, just ask. These do take a little bit of hand strength. There we go. We got that one popped off there again. Right, if we look inside, you can see how the ends of the rivets are spread out and kind of smashed over, and they're holding everything nice and tight into the lid of the toolbox. All right, before you put the next one in, make sure you put your handle in here first. You cannot get the handle in once the other holder piece is riveted in place. And the only way to remove rivets is to drill them out and re-rivet them. So again, make sure your handle's in there before you go crazy and rivet these in place. Again, we're going to put both rivets in, make sure everything lines up. Then we're going to go ahead and give it a squeeze. Another squeeze, and it should pop right off there. Oop, might take one more. And it pops off. Gotta get the broken shank out of there. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge. All right, now we got that piece out of there. We'll go ahead and do the other one real quick. One squeeze, and then probably two squeeze, and maybe a third squeeze to get it to break. And there it goes. And that one is riveted on there. Now our handle is on and in place and nice and solid, and it works just the way it's supposed to. All right, so now the next part we're going to rivet in place is the top part of our latch, and it goes in these two holes you should have already drilled or punched in the front part of your lid. And it's important, make sure this notch here goes up. If you put it upside down, again, you're going to have to drill it to get it off the box so we can put it on the right way. If that notch is not up, the latch will not work the way it's supposed to. And again, we're going to try and do this. We take a rivet so we can put it in one hole and get it to line up. And I notice my second hole isn't quite going to line up, and so I'm going to have to get another tool so that I can kind of get these to wiggle in there and line up the way they're supposed to. But I'm going to go ahead and rivet the one side in first and make sure I kind of hold things in place. We'll go ahead and give it a couple good squeezes. One, and second one, two. Okay. So this tool is called the nail set, and it's just a little tapered punch that we can use because it fits down in through the 1/8-inch holes. And we can use it to kind of wiggle things around and get them to line up for us. So if you just slide it in here and just kind of give it a little work, and it kind of just stretches the latch out a little bit. We don't want to open the holes up in the toolbox, but we want to get things to line up so we can get our rivet in there. You see the rivet just dropped right in for me. Then we'll get the rivet gun on, give it a squeeze, another squeeze, and it'll pop right off for us. All right, so now we've got our top part of our latch riveted in place. Now we got to close our box and try to get our bottom part of our latch lined up where we want it. And you got to have the bottom part on, and you want to just set it on there and make sure you put it on the right way. And then you're going to hold everything in place while you open the latch, and then use your Sharpie to make your marks where you want to drill your holes. Make sure when you open it up to mark your holes that everything stays in place so that you can get a nice accurate Sharpie mark in there. And just do a little dot there and then a little dot on the bottom part to make sure everything stays in place. And you don't want to get it crooked. It's not going to be the end of the world and a big major problem, but we want it to fit on there nice and straight as possible. All right, so now we need to center punch our marked holes. And you see how the box is a little flimsy there. Anytime you're going to center punch, we want to support the inside of the box. And the easiest way to do this is to take your box and go over to the corner of the table. And just take your box and set it right on the corner of the table, and it's a good way to support those holes so that when you do the center punch, you actually get a center punch instead of just the box bouncing underneath it. Again, so just line it up real nice and close. You don't need to kill these again. This is nice thin sheet metal, just a little tap on there will do you, and then we're ready to drill these. Okay, so now that we've got our holes drilled, we've got new batteries in our microphone and new battery in a camera, we'll go ahead and rivet on the bottom piece of our latch mechanism here. And again, this one's really easy to put on upside down if you're not paying attention, so you might want to take a rivet and put one in each hole and just make sure everything looks right, make sure it's going to close the way you want it to before you go to grab the rivet gun. And putting one in there makes it a little easier to align everything before you go and rivet it. So make sure you slide it all the way on there. Okay, make sure it's in there nice and tight before you start squeezing the rivet gun, because if there's a gap in there, the rivet gun may not pull it all the way tight for you. Okay, so there's one. I'll go ahead and do the other one real quick. And some of you guys may not have you don't quite have the grip strength to do this. You can do this with both hands. It's just a little easier. You'll see I've got it, make sure it's pushed all the way down in there as far as I can get it. I'm going to squeeze it. So watch the back side of this one. So as I squeeze the rivet, you'll see it pulls that ball in there. This is really awkward with this latch. One more good. Okay, so that did that. Now our box lid should latch down and pulls it down. So it looks like I could have actually moved this down a little bit more and it would pull the lid down even tighter because there's still a little bit of space in there, but I think it'll work. It'll hold it closed. So the last thing we need to do before we can call our toolbox done is we need to put these little corner supports, corner protectors in here, and we're going to drill the holes and then rivet them on all four corners. And it's important when you go to punch these and drill them that we find a way to support the sheet metal behind there so we don't bend it up too bad. When you go to center punch, especially on this side, if your rivets or if your spot welds are a little weak, you might break the end loose. So before we can center punch these, we need to mark where we want our marks or our center punches to go. And very simply, we're just going to take a Sharpie and hold this on here and give ourselves a mark in there so that we can know where we need to put our center punches. So you can see there's our marks. Now we can center punch and drill our holes. So very simply, we've taken a block of wood, we've just clamped it to the table so it's nice and solid. And this is how you want to support your box so that when you go to do your center punches, they actually punch in there nice and easy. And if you need to get somebody to help hold this, that's fine. But you just want to do it just like you did on the table, just a couple light little, and again, you don't need to kill it. You just need to give yourself a good mark so that your drill bit has a place to start. And you want to make sure that you're supported when you do these. Otherwise, your center punch might move, your box will bend, and now we're going to use a hand drill to drill these. And again, you can do the same thing, real simple. We've got a nice short drill bit here. The biggest thing I see a lot is when students are drilling these holes, they're pushing super, super hard, but they're also crooked. So you want to make sure that you're even this way and up and down as best you can. And then when you drill, you don't need to push super, super hard. These drill bits will do the job. But you do want to make sure that you drill all the way through. The nice thing about drilling against this block of wood is the inside of your holes won't be as super jagged as the other ones, or as the ones in your lid and stuff like that. So now that those are drilled, we can go ahead, and you see how the inside of those holes aren't nearly as rough. We can go ahead and rivet our corner piece on. All right, so depending on how well you marked your holes, we may have to tweak these a little bit to get them to line up. And again, this is where you kind of want to test fit pieces and try to get all your rivets in there first before you start riveting them down, because once you pull it tight, you may not be able to get these in here. This one's going to be a little bit of a challenge, so we'll use our nail set again to kind of put in the hole and just kind of wiggle everything till we can get everything to line up. And it's important that this tool fit in the hole. If you get one that's too big, it's not going to work the way you want it to. And sometimes it helps if you put this in the rivet gun. Gives you a little bit more leverage to hold on to. And then you can kind of work it in there. See how that worked in there? So now I've got all three in, and I can go ahead and set my rivets. So we'll go ahead and do this one since we're on it. One. Go ahead and do the top one. And it helps if you push down on these kind of hard to get them to set. There's that one. And that one. All right, so that's the last step to finishing your toolbox, but you got to do it 4 times. So we'll go ahead and do these other 4 real quick, and then we'll finish this thing out. All right, you guys, there we go. There's the toolbox start to finish. Got the corners on, the handle on, the latches on, the the hinge is in place, and everything works the way it should. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Am I very pleased with the result? Yeah. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, this is the first toolbox that I've actually done 100% start to finish. I've done bits and pieces of them before, but I've never actually done one of these all the way through the way that you guys are doing it. Like I said before, this latch probably could have been done a little bit better, but that's the important thing, is you learn from the mistakes, you learn from the issues that you run into. It's important that you learn from those things. Making mistakes is part of the learning process, and in my opinion, if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying, all right? It's just part of the way things go, especially when you're building stuff that you've never done before. You're gonna have to make some mistakes to learn the right way to do things, and so there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. You can't dwell on them. You need to learn from them and move on and try to improve in the future. So hope you guys appreciate these videos and get a lot of information out of them, and I hope that you guys are happy with the toolbox you produce.